Good morning. Today's professional development presentation and activity workshop is called The Language of School. This is about teaching Tier 2 vocabulary to close reading gaps, improve writing, and deepen content knowledge. And I hope you come away from today with some tools to help kids learn, especially some of those kids that come to school with some disadvantages in terms of what they are able to do and how they're able to access our content. So to start out, I just want you to think about this. I'm going to start out with some theory, but first I want you to read this to yourself and think about how it makes you feel and see if you can understand it. Now, as you read it, if you're anything like me when I first read it, you probably realized that the words were, within your understanding. You might have thought, well, yeah, I know what a batsman is, generally speaking, maybe. I know what a finger is, I know what a leg is, but I have no clue what this is about. And it might make you feel a little bit like our kids feel when they come to school, like there's a joke, there's an inside scoop, there's some kind of reference that they're just not getting, even though they might be understanding the words, right? So what is to be done about this is another question. When kids aren't getting the background here, and if you don't know, I'll give you a spoiler. This is about cricket, and just to show you the amount of background information you need to comprehend something. So what is the other question? What is to be done about this? Okay, so first a little theory. The importance of background knowledge when you read, right? You might know all the words and be able to decode, but one of the things that's going on when you're reading is you are creating a representational model, they call it. There have been studies done that demonstrate how important background knowledge is to reading. For example, the baseball study that showed when kids knew a lot about baseball, they turned out to be better readers and comprehended more when the subject was baseball. Hambrick's study on college basketball showed that if you knew more about college basketball to begin with and you read an article about college basketball, you actually learned more than if you didn't know a lot about it. So knowing more helps you learn more about that subject, which is kind of counterintuitive. You think if you don't know a lot, you'll learn a lot, but it works the opposite because you need to make this mental model as you're reading. Now, how does this apply to middle school? I know it's cut off there a little bit. Middle school is the land of research projects, right? When we get kids to our level, we expect them to have a lot of knowledge and to be able to build that knowledge through reading, right? We expect them to be able to read to learn. We give them a text. We have them use the internet. We have them do these projects that we think we want to be authentic and we want them to be creative. However, there's a concept called cognitive load theory, or CLT, that really puts a big brick wall in front of a lot of kids when they try to do a project like this. Their short-term memory is kind of capped out at 3 pieces of information. Now that's information when you're trying to make things interact, like in solving a problem. So we learn better when we don't have to solve a problem while learning. You try to do 2 things at once, you either learn or you try to solve the problem, but you don't do both. And of course you have to know what you are reading. E.D. Hirsch says, there are no real-world examples of adults with information age competencies who are functioning with a 4th grade vocabulary, right? So if you're not comprehending, you're not doing those wonderful 21st century things we talk about, which are, being creative, combining things in new ways. And we've all seen this in having kids do research projects. I'm sure you've all seen this. They take a passage they read, they take a sentence out, they slap it into a PowerPoint or a Google slide, and you go, what's this mean? And they go, well, the guy, solved the problem of nuclear fission. And you say, what's that mean? Well, I'm not sure. And you really realize how important it is to be able to read well. We often focus and this is going to apply to literacy as well, but school in general, we focus on the connectors. That's these connecting pieces. This isn't my metaphor. This is from Claire Seeley. And she talks about these general skills we talk about. Problem solving, creativity, critical thinking. These are like the connectors in plumbing. And this is often what we start, what we focus on with kids, especially in these middle grades, right? We want them to be able to connect what they're learning, learn some content, connect it with some other content, create a project. What we often leave out is the what is being connected, right? That students need well internalized stuff. I put some different references. You might notice they're a little older. That Hannah Arendt has talked about this, and Antonio Gramsci has talked about this from very different, ideological views. But the idea is that you have these connectors, but you don't have anything to connect to. You don't have any knowledge that funds these creative things you're doing. And Gramsci talked about the baggage. He said that the progressive education at his time was telling kids all about how to move the baggage around, but they didn't give them the baggage to begin with. So they didn't have this stuff. They had the connectors, they had the things joining the pipes, but no pipes and none of the actual stuff that you need to know about. There's different, ways of approaching literacy, and I call it the skills approach. You're talking about, finding the main idea, cause and effect, context clues. Here's some skills of reading that you can apply to anything, right? Here's some connectors that you can connect to any content you get. Well, and then that becomes agnostic to content. So you let kids read whatever they want or whatever might be high interest to them. And you're really thinking that you're teaching these higher order reading skills. What happens then is they get to the later grades and they don't have the knowledge that the other kids might have who've gotten it at home or through trips to museums. And they have these kinds of skills may not even exist, statistically speaking, as something you can test and get better at. For example, finding the main idea. If you know the subject matter, it's very easy to find a main idea. If you don't, it's very hard. And it's not because you need some practice in main idea finding. It's more that you don't have knowledge about what you're reading about. Another approach, which I think is better, is called the knowledge approach. By various knowledge building approach or core knowledge approach, where you build background knowledge as kids are learning decoding skills. You do read alouds, you do discussions, you do all kinds of stuff as they're learning decoding skills. And then once they can decode well and they get to the middle grades, they have all this background knowledge to connect to. And they have a lot of this, they've filled up, I have my bathtub here filled up with knowledge. They've filled that up there, and then they can read fluently. When they get unfamiliar words, they say, oh, I understand that word. I've heard of that. Or are you talking about Egypt? And we studied that in second grade, and now I can connect that to what we're learning. So they come to us in the higher grades with a lot more knowledge in their arsenal, so to speak. And this would be organized around content areas, not organized around these skills that are so hard to teach, that are not really viable solutions to literacy. E.D. Hirsch has another good quote. He said, "Seeds are planted for later growth when latent knowledge becomes so important in subsequent grades." This is what I'm talking about, these seeds of knowledge that are planted in young kids, then when they reach the middle school and they have to read more complicated texts. Because what happens, you have this thing that's well documented called the fourth grade slump, where kids will suddenly drop off in their reading comprehension skills. Well, why is that? It's because suddenly the text becomes more challenging and we're expecting them to read about things that are beyond their personal experience. Now they're reading about, the Chinese empires, or now they're reading about, maybe some scientific theories that don't intuitively make sense, and they have to read and learn about it. And so the background knowledge, like, remember that thing at the beginning of having this background knowledge, Hirsch says it's kind of like getting a joke. Like, you get the joke, you can read it, you get what's going on, you have a mental model. If you don't, these words on a page are just almost unfathomable, and you can't use strategies to disentangle them if it's of significant difficulty. So what are we going to do? We think, how are we going to, what kind of knowledge do we need to equip our students with so that they can read well? And Willingham has this good quote about, knowledge, and what kind of knowledge you need is a million miles wide, but a few inches deep. If you think about, the cricket example, generally good readers have a wide background of knowledge of things that one would expect to encounter in reading. But how do we even attack that? And in middle school, is it too late to give kids the background they need to deal with complicated tech? So here's where I get at some of the solutions and offer some hope and give you some actual ideas for training. What can we really do about literacy in the middle grades? Can we build background knowledge in those who don't have it when they come to us? And how do we catch up struggling readers, and is it possible? First of all, I'll say it's not easy, and there's 4 reasons why. One is the Matthew effect, and this is from the Bible. To he who has much, much is given. And this is the idea that rich readers get richer, that if you read well, you get better at it because you practice it a lot, you like it. You also learn more background knowledge that, of course, applies to other books and other texts. And if you don't like it, you're not going to do it as much. And so you just end up getting further and further behind. It's not just that you get worse. You compound it. It's like a compounding factor. You get exponentially worse and worse as you read. And you read fewer words, it all spirals. Your vocab doesn't develop. The next one is learning to read versus reading to learn. In the middle grades is when students are expected to read complex texts. There's an interesting, Charles and Jacobs have, kind of pioneered this whole concept that there's a point at around age 13 where your listening comprehension is no better than your reading comprehension. Like your listening comprehension, until that point, you'd rather have someone read to you to really get it or tell you about something. But then at age 13, maybe 7th, 8th grade-ish, you are expected, and you get better at, you'll read something and understand it as well as hearing it read out loud. So this is what we start to expect of kids. We give them text and we expect them to read to learn. If you can't read to learn, you're behind the 8 ball and you continue to fall further behind. So this is another double dose of disadvantage that they talk about. And then, of course, usually you have multiple reading issues by middle school. If you have a comprehension issue, it's probably also tied to a decoding issue, and it's hard to disentangle things. And then any intervention you could do has small effects. And this is a Wanzek's, series of researches on this where they did meta-analyses, and you find some weird things in the research, like it doesn't matter the length of time of the intervention, it doesn't matter the size of the group. This is particularly with older kids, and it's just very hard to pin down significant effects in language and literacy intervention. Now, what are some recommendations, some things that we can do to improve readers? Well, we can have more time with text for poor readers. You can all probably imagine the difficulty of that. As I just mentioned, they don't like it, so you have to have them do it more, something they don't like already, and that's a tricky one. Prosody, this is the idea of like reading in proper phrasing with the proper punctuation adhered to, and giving that practice. There's a thing where you can actually do choral reading or sort of model it out loud, and then they follow that and they try to read the same text the way you've read it. I've done it with having them listen to something through headphones, and then we read it out loud together. That gives them practice in prosody. That actually has been shown to have some results in literature. And then giving them challenging texts. So we want to give kids text that is just above where they're actually comfortable a little bit. The comfort level of reading is about 98% of the words on a page. That if you have to look up more than 2% of words, you're not going to persevere. But the challenge is getting them that challenge, and not, leveled readers sort of tend to keep kids stuck where they are. They'll choose Diary of a Wimpy Kid or, the Big Nate books every time they can. We want to push them to something more outside their comfort level. And then the key part for today, I'm finally getting to it, explicit vocab instruction. This has a lot of bang for our buck as educators. Rather than connectors, what I recommend from my research perspective is what Mehta and Mishra called indisciplined knowledge, which means knowledge that is grounded in the discipline, deeply grounded in the discipline, and yet has a bit of indiscipline in it as well, cutting across disciplinary limits. So we talk about cross-curricular stuff a lot, but I would suggest first you need that deep grounding in that subject. But you're all, of course, so we talk about silos. I think silos are okay. I think disciplines are okay. They're the way that we've organized knowledge, and that's kind of the benefit of the middle grades is our teachers are content experts, right? So you learn these subject matters and then you connect them to other disciplines, and that's where the knowledge becomes really firmly grounded. So you can see here vocab is one way to do that. So to get to the tier 2 idea, 3 tiers of vocabulary words. This is a taxonomy that educators use a lot. At the top you have tier 1 words. These are domain-specific words like photosynthesis and hypotenuse. You're going to teach these in your curriculum. You're not going to use them a lot outside of that, right? And then you have down here at the bottom tier 3, which is words that we don't need to teach in school because kids know it. It's house, the color blue, dog, cat, like that. And then somewhere in the middle, these are the academic words that apply to many disciplines, but kids won't bring them to school, or especially disadvantaged kids who come to school without what the Hart and Risley, the research, they talk about the 3 million word gap. These kids will come to school with fewer words in their background, and in particular, these are not necessarily just words, but words that come in reading, words that come in intellectual settings, and they have certain specific qualities. These are words that you can give to children that can benefit them in all their classes. How academic language is different. Academic language, it's a lot of Latin and Greek roots of words. These Latinate words, right? Instead of my view, you say my perspective. And so they have complex spellings, they're expanded noun phrases. Informational density, you get a lot of information in a small sentence or small phrase, and there's a lot more abstraction with these words. So there's also a process called nominalization, which is changing verbs into nouns. So a sentence like, just because people who read more can read better doesn't mean that if you read more, this will make you read better, becomes this. The correlation, see that's a noun there, between amount of reading and reading ability does not imply a causal relationship. So we've made this verb read, make into some nouns. So this is kind of part of what we teach. We want to teach kids that with Latin origin words, you have many ways of changing them into nouns. All right, you have express, you have expression, expressivity, depraved, depravity, serve. You have service. You would also have servitude, right? Expose, exposure. You might have exposition. That's maybe slightly different, but you can see that there's kind of an underlying pattern here. Latinate words have a lot more diverse ways of nominalizing or turning them into nouns. So if we think about how we learn words, this is fascinating to me. When we're learning the word dog, for example, we're also, it's kind of like predictive text. When we read the word dog, you will see, like, in your brain under the surface, the word cat, house, paw. We know this because of timed reading studies where this, it takes longer to read words together that aren't related, whereas dog and house or dog and cat go together more quickly in your mind. So you're always sort of thinking about these related words, right? Similar thing in schema theory here, where you learn, if you learn the word bread, salad, water, mashed potatoes, wine, in terms of a grocery store context, it's very difficult to remember all those words or to really recall the things you learned about them. But if you learn them in the context of a restaurant, then yes, that all makes sense, right? And you can remember those because you have a narrative about how a restaurant operates, right? You first would get the salad, then you get the water, you would get breadsticks initially, and you'll remember a lot of details about those words and you would even remember more about the salad, what kind of salad it was, if you learned them in a network like that, in a schema that made sense. So this is how we have to teach the words to the kids. And what we'll get here then is the words in multiple contexts of our subject matters. For example, the word subordinate. In science, you'll understand that in terms of physics and food webs. In history, you'll understand subordinate in terms of rulers and governments. In literature, you'll have subordinate clauses. And this is going to add to your overall understanding of that word in multiple contexts, right? And we have to learn morphology or word parts. For example, contradict. Say something against something. Predict, right? And then you have dictionary. These all have that root word. So if we learn that word root, we can almost make up words as we go, right? Or we can understand new words that are thrown at us. For example, the word constitute is constituent and constitutional are all part of that word, all part of the web of understanding that word. If you're sold on this, I have an academic word list here in the link. It's also in your Schoology page. I would like you, or in the Schoology course, I would like you to, and I have printouts as well for you, circle at least 10 of these words. This is a list. It's a very large list. I realize it goes several pages. I want you to just circle 10 words on this list that you think you could apply to your subject area very well, very easily, right? And I will start the timer now. Okay, now that that's done, I'd like you to take your list, your physical paper list, and I would like you to go with your department, your subject area departments, and I would like you to try to agree on 5 words that relate very well to your subject area that you can agree on as a department. So maybe you had some different words. come together and say, okay, what are the 5 we can agree on as a subject area that these tier 2 words are going to really apply? And we can think of also multiple units of study they could apply to, like throughout your year. 5 minutes again on the timer, and you may go. So part 3 is going to take a little longer. I'd like you to work with your grade level teams, your teams within grade levels. And I want a list of about 10 words, give or take a few, that your team can kind of put on a poster, but just a list of 10 words out of that list. Yeah, that word list comes from, and it's from a person named Avril Coxhead, and she researched, she's a linguist. And you can read all about it here on this website. To return to our work here, 10 words your team can agree on. I want us to make a poster at some point. Yes, you will have to do some negotiating, and maybe if there's a word that 2 or 3 of you guys think is a good tier 2 word, the other 2 or 1 will be able to say, yeah, I think I can figure out a way to work it in. Okay, part 4 is just, I would like you to now click on that Google Doc, and you guys are going to have to make it. This is what it looks like. You're going to have to make type in your words here. Each of you can work on your own subject area column and think of several applications you can think of for that word throughout the school year. It doesn't need to make sense to me. It only needs to make sense to you and your team members, so that when they go, okay, I'm teaching the word subordinate here in science class. You guys know when you talk about subordinate in fill in the blank, in language arts. So you have some idea of how the words are being used in other subject discipline areas. This is all I want you to do for the rest of the time. So I'm going to actually let you get to work on this, but I'm also going to leave you with my final thoughts here. This is a word families list, the second link here. It gives you the words one, but it gives you them in families so that you could see the different interrelations between words. I just think that's a good resource. And I want to leave you with the idea that, school has a language, and it can be taught and it can be learned. And we can give these words to our kiddos, and really, this is I think, one of the most beneficial things we can do together as teachers, is teaching these tier 2 words. So I hope you found that useful, and I'll be here at the end if you need help with working on your word list. Thanks.